Music was good. You can unmute yourself when you want to chat, okay?
Yeah, I don't want to mess in with everybody.
Yeah, we are the chat here looks a bit horrifying. Everybody's on mute, no cameras, so it's because we didn't start, but it will should be more friendly in a minute.
It's called social.
Oh my God, Albert, your connection is not working very well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll take the Bluetooth is not working very well. Take it off and switch to. Now it should be better.
People are
Good to
showing
see you,
up.
Albert. It's been a while.
It's been a substantial while, but you know, that's what we do with social distancing. We don't see each other for a long time.
Oh, you know each other, guys? Okay.
Oh yeah.
I hope you have a positive past.
We know each other for infinite many years.
Okay.
Yeah. No, Mickey was a tough taskmaster.
It still is. Trust me.
I thought he slowed down a little bit.
No. He just started and now he's accelerating. And I hope he doesn't. I hope he doesn't disappoint us today. Okay.
Well, you know, he's in a marketing selling mode, so he's got to be nice. You know, you can't get too many people upset.
Okay. Hi everyone. I see people joining still. A small number, but there were a lot of people wanting to join this webinar. Okay, so let's give them a bit of no sound. There is.
Oh, I've got it now.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
It's Zoom. Zoom is stupid. They use things that don't work on my computer.
Okay, then it's stupid. Definitely should work on any computer. Okay. So yeah, Albert, Mickey, you were saying.
Just saying. Also, Rudy, it's been a long since we last.
And Rudy. So please entertain the audience while we are still waiting for that for others.
Yeah, I'm
You can tell them horror stories about how bad I was 20 years ago.
Oh, no, I'm not going to tell any of those stories. You'll make me cry.
Oh, okay.
Estella is telling you I became worse.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I haven't experienced you recently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Lucky for you.
Well, I wanted to make a joke. I wanted to make a bad joke on that, but you were first, so.
Yeah. Well, you can still make the bad joke. We can have a different bad joke.
I think we, the four of us, will just get another room, webinar room after the webinar, and we can discuss everything there and share some past experience.
What we can do then, Mickey? Have you gone? No, you're still there.
No, I'm here.
Yeah. What we can do then is talk a little bit about that software I was mentioning.
Well,
If we stay after your webinar.
Yeah, let's see after.
Yeah.
Hello, Sarah. So some people, hello, Navin. Some people we know already.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Stella. Hi, Mickey.
Hey.
No.
I already apologize. At 2:30, I have problems with children, so I will join you for the first part. Thank you for this.
We'll be following up with a recording of the webinar anyhow to everybody who joined. Rakesh, hi, and everybody else, hi. Thank you for the new faces. We're glad to have you.
I have the same problem as you do with the children. Except that I'm not going to leave. I'm going to try not to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And mine aren't my children, they're my grandchildren.
Okay. I can see people join. Yeah, my parents also say, okay, I love you, you're my daughter, but grandkids are something else. Are a different level, so that's true.
You can give them back after a while.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Right now, that's my problem, that I can't give them back that quickly.
Well, according to what I see, you still have a lot of time, so don't worry about that. Okay. Okay, I can see people still joining. It's 3.2. Everybody else who joined recently, we have a condition here that we switch on our cameras. Don't mind the background We are not casting for a fashion show today.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's really nicer and makes us closer if we switch on our cameras and then have it a real webinar and see our emotions and see. Okay, we appreciate that. Hey, Saulus, nice. Okay, and now that Zoom has this option of hiding the background, so even if you have corpse over there, we will not see it. Okay, so
You can see my book.
your books are wonderful. And Mickey has books as well. So Audrey, bon appetit. Okay, anyone with the camera? Feel free. Algirdas,
Yeah.
hi. Ericas,
Hello.
hey. Kiadrus, Raimonda, Urate, Roberta. Come on, guys, ladies.
Turn on your videos. We want to see you guys.
Yeah, no need for.
Put
Good.
your makeup on and
Vasily.
turn on the video.
Vasily, Miriam, Bia, Audias, Nerus, Barat. Okay.
Okay. I think we should start the next 5 minutes after.
Urate, hi, nice seeing you. Asha. Sorry if I pronounce some names incorrectly. It's just challenging so far. Okay, I think we can start, and if anyone else joins, they are welcome. Right, Mickey?
Yes.
Your turn. The
My
stage is
turn?
yours. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Just a note for everyone that we'll be recording today's webinar, so we'll be sending it by emails as follow-up. So those that I don't see here yet, but I mean those that applied attended the event through LinkedIn. Just make sure that the email I'll have is the one that you're stating in LinkedIn. It might not be the one you're using actively now, so just contact me directly by LinkedIn and ask for the recording, okay? In case it doesn't reach you.
Okay. So welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. We are happy to have you with us. As Stella mentioned, we are recording this webinar, so we will be sharing this with you after the webinar. So
And so Albert, everybody will see you. By the way,
yeah.
sorry, Mickey.
Some Hollywood producers may see you and pick you up for some Hollywood movies, so be ready for that. The webinar today is going to focus on the world of supply chain management, we will try to share a high-level process end-to-end to manage the supply chain, so it is faster and leaner and meaner, as you might want to say. I will warn you a priori, there will be many unanswered questions with this, because in 1 hour or 1 hour and 15 minutes, we will not be able to provide all the information for each one of the process steps, but we will give you the full framework, some information on some of the processes, and even some homework you can take and try to execute in your own organizations at the end of this webinar. So you can try and feel the effect of the knowledge we will be sharing with you. And this is a kind of as a background. Maybe I'll say something, me and Stella will try to introduce a little bit ourselves. So I'll introduce Stella, then she will say something about me.
Yeah, it
So,
would sound odd if I start speaking.
So we are Nextera Consulting. I mean, we are the leaders of Nextera Consulting. There are other people in the team, but during this webinar, we'll be hosting it. So Stella is our global director of marketing and sales, and she's also the CEO of our Baltics subsidiary. And she is an expert with more than 12 years of experience in the design and implementation of marketing and sales solutions that have been proven and have been leading companies to substantially increase their inflow of opportunities and the conversion rate from opportunity to actually making money. So this is a few words about Stella.
Thank you very much, Mickey. Well, Mickey, most people attending here would probably have known Mickey from previously, whether it's on public social media or even had experience working together. So for those that haven't heard about Mickey, he's in the business for more than 35 years, or actually 35 years sharp.
Yeah.
Sharp, right? And he has developed. He's within TOC, theory of constraints, and Lean, and has been implementing projects globally and developing the body of knowledge while in Goldratt Group, being a former CEO, and continuously up to today, basically, you can tell. Nextera headquarters is in Israel, but we do operations here in Lithuania, Baltics. So we have a company here as well, Poland, Germany, and Russia, mainly. Well, there is no limitation in geography whatsoever. If there is anything, any company we can bring in enough value, then there's, especially now that most people work remotely. So it's something that is more accessible than ever before. That's in short. And we have our partners, by the way, here joining today. Algida Shabunas is one of the shareholders and partner of Nextera. Okay, Nerius as well. So
and Roberta is here as well.
And Roberta is here. Excellent.
Yeah. So some of our team is already present.
Yeah, Ridal is here. Hi.
Hi, Ridal. Ridal is here as well, our Russian partner.
Okay.
Yes. CIS, Russia and CIS region. Yes. Hi, Ridal. So very short, we were thinking that we will handle questions throughout the webinar. So feel free to type in the questions in the chat. I'll try to kind of screen them if it's something for ad hoc answering, or we'll leave it for the end of the webinar. Also, if I will see that I don't understand the question, or you feel that I have not verbalized the question in the right way, please feel free to unmute yourself and actually try to ask it in a different way. Yeah, I think that's it from my side.
Let me please ask you guys again to have your videos, cameras open so we can see you. It makes us feel as if we are in front of you. It's a bit odd, you know, when I started doing the webinars, I felt odd speaking to my computer screen. It's like, oh my God, I used to speak to people and now I speak to my computer screen. Yeah. It's very strange. So having those videos open makes us feel that we are actually standing in front of you. So if you don't mind, please have your videos open. Okay. Now that we are ready to start, let's dive into the content. We start with defining what are the boundaries of the discussion today. What are we looking on when you say supply chain? Because under the term supply chain, anyone can understand anything that they are used to or want to understand. So in our discussion, supply chain will contain all the entities that participate and all the activities which are involved in converting the end consumer demand to supply. So we look at it from the last point of the supply chain, normally consumer, and all the way to the origin of the raw material and all the entities that in between, whether they are suppliers and suppliers of suppliers and producers and distributors and wholesalers and retailers or other factories or whoever is participating in this whole chain of events that needs to be synchronized so that the last point of the supply chain can consume whatever they are interested in consuming. Even here, or maybe already here, I would like to say that when we use the term supply chain, we're a bit limiting or reducing the complexity of the environment we are looking at. And I think that it would have been better for all of us if we use the term supply chain network rather than supply network rather than supply chain, because it is not really a chain. It is so many entities interconnected in so many ways that if you want to draw it, it will never look like a chain. It will look like a complex network of interconnected entities. But for our discussion today, we will look at the supply chain from end to end, but we will look at it from the point of view of one link in this supply chain, okay? So whether I am a distributor or a manufacturer, or a retailer or a wholesaler, within all of this entity of the supply network that we are looking at, I want to look at the supply chain as a whole, but from my position in that supply chain. Make sense? This is where we want to take a look. And now we understand, well, what is the boundary of the discussion. It might be clear why I'm said in the beginning that we will not be able to provide deep enough answers for each and every item we will discuss today, but hopefully enough so you will understand that the challenges we are talking about have a viable way of handling. Okay. So why are we here today, all of us together? First thing that is happening already, it's not new, that has been happening and discussed for the last few years, is the realization that competition in the world is shifting from competition between companies to competition between supply chains. And I think that the corona pandemic was an opportunity for the world to realize to what extent this is true, to what extent it is not enough that one node in the supply chain is operating in an effective or efficient way. We will maybe try to separate effectiveness and efficiency a bit later. It is how the whole supply chain is able to react to the changes in the environment it is operating. And we see some trends today, which the pandemic has led to, of trying to shrink the supply chain, right? So there are companies today who are trying to bring their production back from the Far East to the West, to find sources of supply which are closer to them. This is part of the realization that how competitive I am is not only about how am I performing, is how am I able to execute the supply chain around me. Again, I'm going, the supply chain is the whole thing we discussed, but if I want to be competitive, whatever place in the supply network I am, I need to be able to operate the supply chain in a way that will make me competitive. Okay? And what does it mean to be competitive? To be competitive from a supply network standpoint is to continuously be able to be faster, but being faster in a cost-effective way. In other words, I need to be able to run my system within the context of the overall supply network I am part of in such a way that I'm able to grow the rate at which I generate money faster than the growth of the rate at which I spend money. Okay, so we use the terms in theory of consensus throughput and operational expenses, but in simple terms, which are not related to a methodology, I need to be able to generate money in a faster, to grow my rate of generation of money faster than the rate that I'm growing my costs. And again, if you go back to the last year and the corona situation, many companies found out that their supply chain got in such a jam where costs were going up, but their ability to generate money went down. And this is obviously not competitive. But even if we take the corona out of the equation and we forget about it, forget about this miserable last 12 months and the terrible situation the world has been placed in during this period, and we go 1 year back and we say, okay, there's no pandemic and there will never be one. still we will find something very interesting. The reality of most players within supply networks is continuously challenged. And in spite of the fact that we understand and we know that we would like to be more competitive, meaning to be able to grow faster and in a cost-effective way, it seems that the rate of improvement of performance in supply chain is not catching up. It's not catching up. And if you take supply chain performance indicators and you compare them between different countries, different companies within the same industries, different entities within the same supply network, you find out that very rarely you see any one of those entities being able to demonstrate consistent superior performance of the supply chain. So it comes to the point where most entities within a supply network would claim that it's out of their hand. The reason the supply chain is not becoming better and better and better in its performance indicators is because of external circumstances, because of competition, it's because of suppliers, it's because of changes in regulations, it's because of whatever external circumstances that are affecting our performance. And we have been able to bring our supply chain to the point where any additional improvement can only be achieved by big investments and or big additional expenses. And you will find that many supply chain operators are actually doing that, investing a substantial amount of money into new technology of warehouse management, of IT, in order to try, or transportation, or distribution, or any of those, in order to try to become more effective. If you will evaluate what they were actually able to achieve in retrospect after they have made this investment, then you will find that some local improvements maybe were realized, but the overall performance of the supply chain did not. So it brings us to the reason. What we are trying, all of us, I believe, to answer today, and based on the information of today afterwards, is it at all possible? Maybe we are doomed. Maybe supply chain management is a battle lost a priori. Maybe it is impossible to continuously and cost effectively shrink the supply chain response time. Or maybe it is. So what we'll try to answer today, whether or not it is possible to do that. Make sense? I hope everybody understands and makes sense, that it makes sense to them. Okay, let's continue. So before we answer in the content of the webinar, let me share with you some examples to prove that it is possible, okay? There are known cases where some companies are able to operate their supply chain in such a way that it is very fast, very, very fast, and very cost effective. So just a few examples. You can look at Dell. Dell is calling themselves the zero-time organization. They talk about notebook computers primarily, and these guys are doing 46 inventory turns a year of their business. 46 inventory turns a year, just for everybody to understand what it means. It means that if you look at Dell's sales and divide it by the quantity of inventory they are holding, they are selling 46 times more than their inventory. Okay? This is a very high level of performance, because if you compare it to other competitors which are just in this business of computers, you'll find that the second best is doing 10 inventory turns a year, which means that the competitors are reacting much slower. 46 inventory turns, just to make it clear for everyone, if we do a small calculation, 365 divided by 46, 8 days. This means that Dell is able to react to changes in the market in 8 days. The second best competitor that is doing 10 will take him 36.5 days to react. So our objective was to be fast and cost effective. Dell is doing this. They are significantly faster than the second best competitor. In the traditional, simple grocery type supermarkets, Walmart is turning its inventory 8 times a year. Now, you would expect that a grocery supermarket will have high inventory turns, right? Because we are selling fresh products a lot, apples and tomatoes and milk and cheese and things that expire very rapidly. They should turn very quickly. But the best retailer after Walmart is doing 2.2 inventory turns a year, which means that on average, they react to the market in a pace of once in 6 months. Okay, while Walmart is doing it 8 times a year. And 8 is already something quite extraordinary in this market. One of the most amazing supply chains of the world is Apple. Apple continuously wins awards for their supply chain management capability. They are turning their inventory 50 times a year, 7 days. Just to understand what it means. If I go today to buy a Samsung phone, and I don't compare the technologies, let's assume everybody believes whatever they want to believe, okay? Let's assume that objectively, Samsung has a better technology than Apple, okay? Let's assume for the sake of the discussion that their technology is better. If I go to the market today, when I have to compare Samsung 12 with iPhone 12, now we'll go to the market as a Samsung consumer. I will find in the dealerships of Samsung the ability to buy a new originally packed Samsung 3. It still exists in the market. If you go to any distributor of Apple, official Apple distributor, and you want to buy iPhone 11, it doesn't exist. Okay, 5 days after iPhone 12 came out to the market, iPhone 11 disappeared. Okay, their ability to react to the market, when we talk about fast and lean, this is the most amazing example. You cannot find, not only in the terms of iPhones, in terms of any product that Apple is managing, in about 5 to 7 days after a new version comes to the market, the old version disappears. That's a very quick reaction to the market. Zara, for example, converts an idea to a product on the shelf in 2 weeks. Just as comparison, fashion industry normally would do it in 12 months. Okay, we talk about 2 weeks versus 12 months. Zara is doing 52 fashion collections a year. The best second fashion retailer is doing 4. Okay, so just 4 examples to show that it is possible.
Mickey,
Yes.
Zara, they might make 50 collections, but why would they stop selling stuff that sells well?
Sorry, what was the question?
Zara might make 50 collections a year, but why would they stop selling stuff that sells well? Because they do that.
Yeah, they do that because of the strategy.
Yeah. Why? But why is the question? You don't need to answer. It's a question I have for Zara, not for necessarily
Well,
for you.
because in their strategy, a product needs to be removed from the market, so there will not be too many of it out there. It's a marketing strategy.
Still, the question remains.
Okay, fine.
Never mind.
I agree.
Go
I
on.
agree. I don't need to answer this. To me, what is important to show is that it is possible to have a supply chain which is lean and mean. Okay, what we were looking. So, under the common experience of most supply chain environments, where the effort to become faster and more cost effective are improving the performance marginally, these companies have been able to improve their performance dramatically and to keep their distance from the market huge. Where they are located and where the second best is located is so far away that they don't really have a competition. Okay, I'll give you one example of our customer at Nextera. We talk about a company that produces medical supplies. These are medical supplies which are in the area of infusion bags, okay, things that are linked to infusion bags and to infusion bags themselves. So this company has been struggling for years with becoming a reliable supplier to their customers. Before we worked with them, their on-time in full performance to customer orders ranged between 55 to 68%, depending on the product family they were producing. The missed committed time to the customer ranged between 2 to 4 weeks. So in 45 to 32% of the cases, when they missed the delivery time, it was between 2 to 4 weeks later than what they have promised, and they were stuck with excess amount of inventory to the roof. 3.6 inventory turns a year. This would mean that about 3.5 months of inventory, 3 months of inventory at all time within their supply chain. We have worked with them to implement the solution we will discuss today. The company for the last 5 years is consistently having an OTIF of 98% or more. So they never go below 98%, but they go between 98 and 100 throughout the year. They can deliver, they don't, but they can deliver in 40%, in 60% less time than they did before. Then they're committed. I mean, they have a policy delivery time of 6 weeks. They can deliver today in 2, okay? But they don't because it's not required. The same factory is producing 50% more with the same resource than it did before. They do 8 inventory turns a year instead of 4. So they went double their inventory. So they're half of the inventory. Actually, with the increase in sales, you understand what happens. And the company is on a constant trend of improvement. So every year becomes better than the previous. And we are very proud of this implementation because of the sustainability of the implementation. Because for so long, the company is able to sustain this level of performance and becoming better and better. So all of these examples, these 5 examples I'm sharing with you, is to show that the answer to the question, is it possible to cost effectively and continuously shrink the supply chain response time? The answer is absolutely yes. It's possible to shrink the response time, and it is possible to do it in a cost-effective way, in a way that enables the rate of growth of money generation to be faster than the rate that cost is growing. All of these companies have been demonstrated. I'm using here just one example. We have many other examples to demonstrate how far and how fast can companies bring their performance in comparison to their competition.
Mickey, Jorge is asking something, I assume for the previous slide, there's a question of what was the impact of quality on the OTIF? I guess, Jorge, this is the the case A, medical supplies, right? You are asking. Feel free to unmute and specify the question if so.
Yes, I'm speaking from long way out of where you guys are in another time zone. But in the OTIF, there are 4 major factors that multiply themselves to obtain the final number. Mostly found it's that quality, it's one of them. What that has a big impact in terms of bad deliveries, in terms of it does not comply with customers. But being 98% of tip regarding it's a high number.
It's a very high number. Well, this company, please pay attention, they are a medical supplies company. They absolutely cannot have quality issues. It's impossible. There are very strict standards controlled by FDA. Quality was not an issue before, and it's not an issue now.
So it means that the whole improvement had to do with being able to ship on time and in full, basically.
Yes, all improvement was about supply chain.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so why the question we want to answer now is why is it that most companies are still struggling to get their performance to a similar level like the previous one we were discussing? If they can do it, why others cannot do it? What is the reason they cannot? It's not that they cannot, it's what's the reason they are not doing it? Of course they can. So any management practice, supply chain of course as well, has 3 major tasks: to plan, to execute, and to become better. When you look at those 3 tasks in the context of supply chain, the planning is relatively simple. It is relatively simple because the mathematics involved in planning are straightforward. Mostly it's adding and subtracting, sometimes with a bit of multiplication and dividing. Nothing more complex than that in any part of the supply chain, not in purchasing, not in production, not in distribution. There is no mathematics which is more complex than that. What makes the supply chain planning challenging is the magnitude. It is normally consisting of the need to generate or create those calculations in very high frequency and very high volume. And if you add to this variability and variation, it makes this a big challenge to plan and to execute. And then because of this magnitude, making continuous improvement becomes even a bigger challenge because you don't know where. There are so many things that can be improved that you have no idea where is the right place to improve. And what most companies are doing, they are trying to improve in too many places simultaneously because they can't make a choice which one is more important than the others. However, historically, before the computer era, companies in the supply chain environment still needed to make those decisions of planning and execution and improvement. And because of the magnitude and the variation and variability, they could not do it in the level of detail required. So they needed to find a way to make the planning and execution of supply chain management in a way which is cost effective. That doesn't require too much time, doesn't require too much cost. Otherwise, they had to assign a lot of people to these calculation tasks. Make sense? It would take a lot of time. This was before the computer. And therefore, before the computer era, we invented practices for managing supply chain or nodes within the supply chain that are diminishing the size of the problem, making it more manageable. So, for example, in production and purchasing, it was very common to set fixed intervals for production planning. We do production before the first MRP system, production planning would have been done once a month. Until today, which is many, many years after IT was introduced into production environment, there are still companies who are planning once a month or once a week. Okay, fixed intervals between production planning. Batching was introduced so that we don't have to make decisions in very high frequency. We can make them in a lower frequency. In inventory management and purchasing, we use grouping. So we use Pareto or other ways of grouping, it doesn't matter. Which means that instead of making decisions per each and every item we are producing or distributing or selling or warehousing or servicing, we are grouping them into groups and creating one practice for the whole group. We use min-max system in order to set apart the decisions. We don't make the decision as frequently as something changes, but only when enough changes being accumulated. And we are using batching again in order to get the same effect. Delay the decisions and make less of them. So all of these practices that were invented before the computer era were invented as a compromise. It is a compromise because they are carrying significant negative effects. People are not stupid. They were aware to the negative effects of these practices. And what are those negative effects? The minute we work with any of these practices, we are delaying our response, we are delaying our reaction to what is happening in reality, and therefore elongating our response times. So any of these practices, batching, min-max, or reorder point, or planning once a week, or once a 2 weeks, or once a month, these practices means that we react slower to what is happening around us. Therefore, in comparison to the objective of having a faster response time, we use practices that make our response time slower. Because we respond slower and the response time is longer, it forces us to hold higher inventories, because inventories are always related to the response time. I need more inventory if it takes me a month to respond, whether if it takes me a week to respond. So Apple can hold 5 days of inventory, while Lenovo will hold 50 days of inventory. Okay, this is because the response time is 10 times slower than Apple. This leads to supply and demand misalignment. There is always inventory we have in excess of what we cannot use, and inventory is in absence of what we could have used, but we did not have the ability to react fast enough. Our reliability is low. Look at my customer for the medical equipment, where they've had 50, 60% reliability of supply, not because they did not care about their customers or did not make any possible effort to deliver on time. They did, but they could not. And de facto, the costs are increasing. We hold more inventory, we hold more capacity, we have more warehousing spaces, we have more transportation, we have more handling of our products, we have more obsolescence. Not to mention the cost of lost sales, lost customers, customer complaints, and quality, Jorge, also negatively affected by that. So all of those were compromises we were willing to make before the computer era, because we believed at that time that they are mandatory, they are necessary, because we can't do the calculation in a cost-effective way. However, fast forward to today, we have new IT capability. We have systems which are strong, fast, and in terms of doing the calculation, they are free of charge. Systems of today can make the calculations required as frequently as you would like them to do that. But they will do it effortlessly, timelessly, and free of cost. But look at all the new IT systems out there. All the new IT systems out there, all of them are bringing this new capability, and at the same time, they are coding in those decision-making practices. So all the ERP systems use min-max. All the ERP systems use grouping. All the ERP systems use batching. Many of the companies implementing ERP systems are planning in fixed intervals. What will be what is the effect of it? What is the effect of us using brand new capable technology that can calculate whatever we need as frequently as we need in no time, but we force this technology to use capability which is, or decision-making rules, which were a compromise of the pre-computer era. It would mean that in the post-computer era, we force our computers to make the same compromises. It would mean that we cannot expect, even though we invested millions in new technology, we cannot expect to see any significant improvement in our performance. As long as we will not get rid of all of those decision-making rules that were invented in the pre-computer era, we will not be able to achieve meaningful improvement in the post-computer era, in our current era. So we need to break out of this. What is required for that? We need an effective supply chain management process for planning, executing, and continuously improving. We need to stop using all the compromised tools of the pre-computer era, and we need to start using better tools that harness effectively the power of the new technology. I always say it is similar to you guys buying a brand new car and tying in front of it a donkey and disabling the engine, but then complaining that the car is not driving fast enough. So what we do today with technology, not only IT as a whole, production technology, warehousing technology, transportation technology, and information technology, it's exactly the same. We buy new technology and we take the engine out, put a donkey in front, and then are confused on the question, how come we are not becoming better? And how come we don't see return on our investment? We cannot see return on investment if we are not doing the right thing. So let's talk about this new effective process for managing supply chain. It has three parts: the planning part, the execution part, and the becoming better part. Let's review each one of the steps quickly. First, every one of us is not the whole supply chain, is not the whole supply network. We are just one node in this supply network, sometimes more than one node, maybe two nodes in the supply network, maybe three nodes, but we are not the whole supply network. So when we talk about effectively managing our supply chain, where is our supply chain starting? Where is our supply chain ending? What does it mean for us to effectively manage our supply chain? And the minimum you should consider for your supply chain is adding your first line of suppliers to your supply chain and the first line of customers to your supply chain. And sometimes this will not be enough in order to achieve the objective of faster and leaner supply chain, and you will have to add to your boundaries deeper levels of the supply side or deeper levels of the demand side. Just from terminology standpoint, all the side of the supply chain that comes from supply to your node in supply chain management is called the downstream, and everything that goes from you to the market will be the upstream. So how far, how deep into the downstream you go, into the upstream you go, is part of your understanding of your supply chain and your understanding of what must be part of it in order for your supply chain to be faster and more cost effective. When we talk about understanding the boundaries, the next important thing to do is to decide how will I measure the performance of my supply chain? What will be the right performance measure? We'll talk about two types of measures. We'll talk about KPI and we talk about performance measures. What we will not talk about is KPIs. Okay, so key performance indicator, there is only one. And the reason we define a key performance indicator is to tell our system, our decision makers, that out of all the measurements that need to be constantly improved, if at any point of time there is any situation that puts a conflict between the measurements, the KPI is more important than the others. Okay, so the reason to have a KPI is to create clarity of priority in case of conflict. So the second part of the effective management of our supply chain is to know how are we going to measure our performance. Now when we know that and we know our supply chain structure, the next part is to have clarity about the reliable replenishment time between nodes. Now, this is one of the critical elements of the process because in terms of effectiveness of managing the supply chain, the shorter is the replenishment time, the better we are. Okay, just try to imagine a supply chain with 0 replenishment lead time. I know it's impossible, but it's a good imagination exercise. If it has 0 replenishment lead time, it will have 0 cost. It will have 100% on time in full service. Okay, and it will be the most cost-effective supply chain ever possible. So it doesn't matter what the replenishment lead time is when we start with. Knowing it and constantly working to reduce it is a critical factor in effectively managing the supply chain. It doesn't matter what node of the supply chain we are. And it affects everything. It affects productivity, it affects cost, it affects inventory, it affects availability, and it affects productivity of the system. When we know that, the next part is to take advantage of statistics. Every supply chain, at some part of the supply chain, holds inventory, okay? Every supply chain holds inventory. But there is a big question, where should we hold the inventory? Where is the right place for inventory? Oftentimes, the common answer is hold the inventory as close as possible to where it is consumed. Make sense? The common practice is bring the inventory as close as possible to where it is consumed. However, statistics is a very interesting characteristics. The accuracy of inventory is directly related to the ability to look at a bigger part of the market, to look at a bigger part of those serviced nodes in the supply chain, or in other words, to take advantage of the power of aggregation. What do I mean? If an item is being consumed in 5 different locations, holding this item in the 5 locations separately is subject to high variability in consumption, because every location will have its own variability. Holding the item farther away from these 5 in an aggregated location that supplies to all the 5 will have a much higher accuracy of the inventory with a much lower inventory because of the statistical phenomena called fluctuations average out. So in every supply chain, we can identify aggregation points where it makes sense to hold inventory for a wide range of consuming points. And the inventory should be held as much as possible in the aggregation points and as less as possible in the close to the consumer. It enables us also the flexibility to divert the inventory to the right location. So we have to identify within our supply chain where are the best aggregation points. When we have identified them, we can establish in those points distribution centers, and we can define for each and every one of those stock holding locations how much inventory we need to hold for each one of the items. In our terminology, we will call those stock targets, stock buffers. This is where, because buffer is a protective mechanism, the inventory here is a protective mechanism. The aggregation points enables us to hold the inventory in a central point and direct it to wherever we want, which means that we can react very quickly because we react only with transportation time, okay? So we are improving our response time to the market if we pull the inventory into the aggregation points. This is the planning side, okay? What is my supply chain, where it starts, where it ends, how I'm going to measure it, what is the replenishment time between each one of the nodes within my supply chain, where are the best place to aggregate inventory, and if I hold inventory, wherever I hold inventory, set inventory targets based on this reliable replenishment time, not based on forecasted consumption as normally we do, but based on the supply time, on the reliable replenishment lead time. Plan. Now, when we plan, we can move to execution. In execution, there are a few steps which are critical. The first one is the order daily everything that is consumed. The past pre-computer era practices of min-max and reordering are adding into the forecasting horizon a policy time. If I have a min-max, it means that from the moment I have max inventory to the moment the inventory will reach minimum, I will take no action. Inventory is going to be consumed, but no action will be taken. This is time that is added into the forecasting horizon. This time was invented in the pre-computer era so that the decision of reordering are set apart one from the other. We can do them in a slower rate. In these days, where there is no cost for making an order, we can make an order every time there is consumption. This will reduce the forecasting horizon, will shrink it, will make the supply chain faster to react, and will reduce the inventory in the supply chain. So we order daily everything that is consumed, and we replenish frequently. Frequency is important because it sets the balance between, in every supply chain, there are two types of inventories. There are inventory which we physically hold, and there are inventories which are on the way. The frequency changes the balance between the two. So if I have a situation of one consumption node, one supply node, and the consumption node is consuming 80 pieces every 4 weeks, okay? And it orders once every 4 weeks. So the inventory in the system will be 80 pieces in the supply node minus what in the consumption node minus what they are consuming, plus 80 which are on the way. However, if they will order every week, then they will have 20 on hand plus 4 times 20 on the way. So the overall inventory in the system will be reduced from 160 that it was before to 100. Okay, the overall inventory in the system is reduced, and the overall inventory on hand is smaller, which makes the system react faster and be more accurate, because forecast is more accurate for 1 week than it is accurate for 4 weeks. So increasing frequency of shipments is very important. Replenishing to consumption, including from production or purchasing, is the next part of the process. So a unit was sold, a unit needs to be replenished. In purchasing, we also might want to consider changing the relationships with suppliers, all of them or some of them. Not only change the mode of operation, but also the business relationships, so that there will be an alignment between the supply side and the demand side in the downstream part of our supply chain. The stock buffers themselves, or time buffers in production, are used for priority setting. So because in execution, you can plan whatever you want, guys, but life is always more surprising than any plan. So the buffers themselves provide a mechanism for setting the right priorities. If we look at time buffers, if there is a time buffer between we start the task to the time we have to complete it, the closer we are to the completion and still did not complete, the higher will be the priority. If we have a stock buffer and the less inventory we have in the stock buffer, the closer we are to zero or to the safety stock, the higher will be the priority. So we can create a priority system that aligns operations with the objective to have the right inventory or the right on-time performance to the market. And lastly, we can use the same mechanism for establishing a process which is ongoing improvements, which is focused. So this is where we can take advantage of Lean. As Stella said in the beginning, I'm quite familiar with Lean as well. Actually, I was responsible for some Lean education programs in some universities in my career. And I can tell you, Lean is excellent philosophy, but it has a substantial problem. It has no guiding mechanism. Lean is oblivious to where you apply the tools of Lean. So you might find yourself applying Lean solutions and getting maybe some local effects or maybe not, but don't get any improvement in the system as a whole because you are not using it in the right place. However, if you look at those buffers and you're defining those buffers a point where crossing this point means that we have somehow experienced a blockage in our flow, a stoppage into our flow, or something that made our flow slower. And in this point, you collect information about what held us back. You can do the analysis of those things that held us back and focus our Lean tools on those issues, which means that now that we will use the Lean tool, we will get a real improvement for the supply chain as a whole. So this is like a high-level process for the whole supply chain management.
Mickey, there's some questions on the daily ordering here. I'll try to read some of those. And Albert, feel free to jump in. Okay, so Jorge was asking, what is the impact of long transportation times, example from China to America, in terms of placing a daily order? And the continuation would be, oh, my chat is so, batching will exist. Sorry, my chat is being a bit naughty as well. Batching will exist to fill up a minimum size container, for example. Mickey, let me know if question is clear.
I'll try to answer as much as I understand, but who asked the question?
Jorge.
Okay, Jorge, if I don't answer well enough, then correct me, okay? Long transportation time has no effect on the ordering frequency. It has an effect on the replenishment frequency. I can order once a day, even if the supplier is on another planet. Okay? It doesn't mean he has to deliver once a day. Okay? Did I answer this type of the question, Jorge?
Yeah, just a question is, I mean, I think we should put the boundaries around what does it mean in ordering every day. So for argument's sake, if I consumed, if I sold 10 units and I got 1,000 units in stock because of the total demand for for the month or whatever it might be. Now immediately I place an order for another 10. And there might be minimum order quantities when you do setups and batches. If you want to make a 10 little containers in plastic injection molding, it's not, you can't even mix that quantity in a bin to actually make it. So I think what we need to just maybe separate between knowing what we need to order according to the buffer versus physically placing an order on the supplier for the 10 or placing an order on the factory for the 10.
Okay.
Actually
So
creating a work order in the system that says.
So I'll repeat my answer. Reordering has nothing to do with the ability or inability of the supply not to supply. Okay. Reordering is a simple act of placing an order of what I need. By placing the order, I do not force or compel the supply node to take any action.
Okay, but I think it's, yeah, where do you, from a systems point of view, do you physically place the order? I.e., if I have a factory warehouse and I sold 10 yesterday, do I create a work order to make 10?
Well,
or am I just aware that I've consumed 10 in my buffer?
Okay, that's a good question, and it a bit goes deep into the process itself. But I will always place immediate order for the greater between what I consumed and the MOQ.
So again, if you when you say place an order, if we work on the manufacturing side, if you work on the purchasing side, we can ask the same question. One is creating a purchase order, other is creating an internal work order.
Yes.
So if I raise a purchase order on my supplier because I consume 10 units, that might be possible. Or if I sold one this today, I need to raise a purchase order on my supplier. My supplier gets a purchase order of 1 unit, and he cannot not respond because otherwise his reliability would be jeopardized.
Mm-hmm.
So again, there's a natural flow that in the words that we use and the systems that we use and the terminology that we use, that there would be a benchmarking in terms of at what point do I actually physically raise the work order, and what point do I physically raise the purchase order, not to confuse the supply chain that says I received a replenishment purchase order.
That's true. But as I said, you're going now into fine details of cases that might happen. And of course, there are many cases, and I will not be able to respond to all of those cases in this webinar today. But I want to say,
one thing you can say, Vicky, sorry to interrupt. One thing one can say is what you're giving here with this order daily thing is you are giving information to the supply chain,
yes,
no matter how far back you go with it. And that is important information for them to know what is coming in terms of work orders. And they can go so far as to say, I don't even need a work order. I am going to make it when it makes sense. And whether they make it in big or small batches, that will have something to do with the inventory that you need. But the information part of it is the important part.
Yes.
Absolutely. So we need to separate between a formal procurement work order system and a system that tells me what is the consumption of the product at the end item. And so when we talk about order daily, it creates people's connection with order, means I place a physical purchase order, which is different from providing the information.
Well, again, we are going into a case. Okay, order daily means place an order, a daily order for everything that is being consumed. Whether or not legally a supplier will see it as an order of information, it's a case. It depends on the specifics of the situation we are looking at. It can be that it is a real purchasing order, and it can be that it will become a purchasing order under certain conditions. But this is going into two fine details for now. For me, what is important that people participating here today will understand
That's fine.
that the consumption of any item, once it was consumed, triggers a replenishment order from the supply point. it is not more than passing this information that this item was consumed from this location at this quantity today, and we need to refill it.
Yeah.
What will be the exact procedure of refilling goes to the relationship between the supply node and the consumption node.
Let me say one more thing about this. Order daily, everything that just had a consumption is something that we understand within TOC, but many people respond to it and don't understand it and don't understand the problems involved in what we're trying to do. And there needs to be a way to communicate this bit in a better way. And you don't need to do it now, but there is that need. This morning, I went through a similar presentation of mine, and I had exactly the same response as you were just getting now.
Guys, I want to make it clear. I try to explain. The practices that existed before the computer time were based on min-max or reorder point. Min-max and reorder point create a big gap between the time the inventory arrives to a consumption point to the next time the consumption point will reorder. This inflates the horizon of forecasting, and it creates a lower accuracy of forecast with higher level of inventories. The order daily shrinks the horizon of the forecast, makes the inventory lower, and the accuracy of the forecast higher. Now, the practical mechanism implementing it is not the content of this webinar, okay? There are all kinds of questions how to make it practical. All we need to understand now is that we want to shrink the forecasting horizon, have lower inventory, so we can have what we started with, right? We wanted to have a supply chain that reacts faster and is able to generate more money faster than it generates more cost. That's the issue here. So a little bit into the elements of the different steps of the process. So we talked about them. I will not back too much right now on those. We talked about KPIs. Maybe you would like to think about when we say that there is one KPI for your supply chain, what would be that KPI of your supply chain, and how it interacts with other performance measures you think should be part of your supply chain management practice as well. We talked about the importance of the replenishment time and the importance of aggregation. And there are aggregation in many locations possible, including within production. So it might be that within your production, it makes sense to work, to hold in an aggregation point, work in process, so that production can react faster to the consumption or to the market demand.
Mickey, Rakesh is sending a comment here regarding replenishment frequency, saying it depends on how flexible the supply node is. Would you like to comment on that? Replenishment frequency depends on how flexible the supply node is. Rakesh, comment on the replenishment frequency. Have anything to say here?
No, it might be the case. It may not be the case. It's a matter again when we go into the case. When we go into implementing those steps into a supply chain, they must be thought about and tailored to the specifics of the configuration of the supply chain. You have to take those guidelines and find the right way to adapt them to your own supply chain. Sometimes, and there is no one correct answer for all. Some suppliers, Rakesh's comment is right. For others, it is less correct, and for others, it is not correct. So within the same supply chain, the answer may be different in different cases, okay? So not only within different supply chains, the answer may be different, but within the same supply chain, the answer may be different between different parts of the same supply chain. So of course, thank you for the comment. So I explained the order daily and the importance of this and the effect on The effect of order daily on supply chain is just dramatic in terms of inventory reduction and increasing the inventory accuracy. The frequency of shipment, I explained, the reason to think about frequency is this change in balance between the on-hand inventory and on-the-way inventory. Inventory which is on the way gives us the flexibility, at least the last order can be canceled or changed. Okay, so if there is a change in the market, we have less inventory on hand and less inventory on the way, and some inventory can still be affected if the market changes. So the higher frequency gives us this flexibility. Replenish to consumption, again, of course, practical question, yes, MOQ, full container, full truck, yes, no, all of those are good questions, need to be answered specifically, but the basic idea is you would like to replenish exactly what you consume, what you would like. So even if there are other considerations that are currently limiting this ability, the good practice of supply chain management will challenge those. We'll try to find ways to make as much as possible a direct alignment between consumption and replenishment. And that's to yield in to the existing practices which are a compromise, even for the supply point. Please remember where we started the discussion, that batching is a compromise practice that started in the pre-computer era. Okay, so even for the supplier, it is better to fight batches. So there is a right way always to find a way to fight those practices that are negatively affecting the supply chain as a whole, because when the supply chain loses, let's go back to the beginning of this presentation, we all lose, not only the one company. The competition shifts to competition between supply chains. If we are unable to persuade our customers and or our suppliers to improve their performance for the improvements of the competitiveness of all of us, then we get stuck with slow and expensive reaction to the market and loss of competitiveness. Okay. So if you look at it in the whole supply chain that we looked at, replenishment lead time is different things in different nodes. So from supplier to raw material warehouse, we talk about supply lead time. Within the factory, we talk about production lead time. From factory warehouse to distribution, we talk about transportation lead time. In each one of them, we have to look from our point of view. Do we have relevant aggregation points to set the right stock buffers in those locations and to work on the right business relationships between the nodes of the supply chain? Within production, we might even use time buffers, not only stock buffers. Over and above, we have the KPIs of the system as a whole, and in supply chain, we will always look at least on availability or on time in full performance, and other performance measures that can be set according to the different supply chain nodes. Different supply chain nodes may have different performance measures. All of them need to subordinate to the supply chain, delivering what we promise to the market, when we promise to the market, according to the promise made. This is how we become competitive and be committed to becoming better. So one of the things we want to look at when we look at KPIs is not on the absolute level of performance, but on the relative change in the level of performance. Okay, we don't ask what is our on time in full performance right now, but how it is in comparison to yesterday. Okay, so measurements should be measured in relativity to what they were before. We need to see the continuous improvement in our performance. A little bit about outdated tools we are still using and alternative tools we would like to use. So in the outdated tools, setting fixed planning intervals, well, we need to change it to plan daily. It doesn't matter where we are in the supply chain, we want to move to a daily plan procedure. Or even sometimes higher frequency than once a day. We use forecasting. The new mode of operation is to respond to actual consumption. Basically, forecasting importance is significantly diminished in the new mode of operation. Batching, we need to replace it with a relentless effort to fight batches and to get to the point. There is a reason why the Japanese are fighting for the concept of a single piece flow concept. Okay, they are not idiots. So batching is an enemy of productivity in any part of the supply chain. So we want to constantly fight to reduce them. Most measurement systems are measuring every part of the system against itself. We want to move from measuring efficiencies to measuring the system performance as a whole. We want to be able to measure every part of the system in the way it affects the system performance as a whole, not in the way it affects itself. We have to stop grouping.
Mickey?
Yes.
Sorry. You're now mentioning efficiency. Is there any case that measuring efficiency makes sense? Actually, it contributes positively to the system.
Well, there is one specific case, not very common, where efficiency would make sense. And this is when a flow productivity is restricted by a physical resource capability, okay, which we call a constraint of the flow or a resource constraint of the flow. So if a flow is constrained by the capability or capacity of one resource, then in this specific resource, it will make sense to measure efficiency. But it is not a very common reality. It's very rare to find a flow which is restricted by the capacity of one resource.
Okay. Yes.
We have to stop grouping. Grouping was a practice before computer time. There is no reason why we cannot manage each and every item separately in each and every location, irrespective of where it is or what it can do. We have to kill the min, max, and reorder point practices and replace them with the daily reordering practice. And we must stop using cost per unit. One of the most, if there are two measurements which are devastating in terms of their effect on the speed and cost effectiveness of supply chain performance, it is efficiency and cost per unit. Now, I said I cannot give all the knowledge required, but I want you to understand the concept that cost per unit is wrong because the cost is of the system. Okay, so the only place where we can measure really cost is not by taking the cost. I tend to use recently an analogy to say, how do we measure cost per unit, right? You can only look at the end of the period. Say at the end of the period, my cost was 1,000. During the period, I sold 1,000 pieces. Therefore, my cost per unit was one per unit. Okay, my cost was 1,000. I sold 1,000. My cost was 1 per unit. Of course, if accidentally I sold 500, then the cost was 2 per unit. No, the cost was still 1,000, right? Nothing changed in the cost. You stayed exactly with the same 1,000 it was in the previous example. So cost per something is a measure that is misleading because it gives you the impression that if you will sell one more next period, then the cost will grow. So if I sold 1,000 last period for a cost of 1,000, would my cost go up if in the next period I will sell 1,001? And the answer is clearly not. Okay, so cost per unit is a very misleading thing. So we move to measuring the throughput of the system. What can you expect if you get rid of these tools and follow this process? You can expect a meaningful reduction in your response time. The minimum we talk about is 50%. You can expect a drastic reduction in the overall system stock, between 30 and 50% of less stock in the system. You can expect to bring the reliability of your performance to 95% or more consistently. You can expect at least 25% more productivity of your system. you can expect at least 20% increase in your sales. And you can expect at least 30% improved profitability. And the best is that you can expect that it will continue to improve. So yes, it is possible with the right process, with the right tools, we can continuously and cost effectively shrink supply chain response time up to the point that every node of the supply chain is actually experiencing zero supply time. Okay, zero supply time. We can bring nodes in the supply chain to experience zero supply time, even when the actual replenishment lead time is definitely greater than zero. So something you can take and do for yourselves. You can test it. You can try to see what happens if you check the effect of a small part of the changes on your own performance. You can choose one stock location where you have, and with this one stock location, choose one small group of products. And against this one small group of products, choose a reference group of products so you can compare performance. And what you can do is you can take this pilot group of products and decide how much inventory you want to hold for them based on the formula that is being over here. How much is the forecasted consumption within the reliable replenishment lead time? So you need to know how much it takes you to reliably replenish. Then you have, once you know that how much inventory you need to hold, you will be able to identify which items have excess inventory already, and if they have excess inventory and there are any orders, you can cancel them, and which items currently do not have inventory sufficient and to fill them up. Then you order every day as consumed or MOQ, and you replenish in the double of the existing frequency. And within a period that you are piloting, just measure your performance in the group you chose versus the reference group. Just see what happens in terms of how much inventory you have, inventory turns, what is the availability, how much stock out you are experiencing, and what is the level of service you are experiencing to the items in the pilot versus the item in the reference group. Once you will do that, you will feel the power of the solution. It's very simple to do, and it's very quick to demonstrate the benefits. Okay, now I'm open to any questions that we might have, Stella.
Yeah, for now, we've been discussing them throughout the webinar. I think Anish had a question, if I'm not wrong, about the UQ and lot sizes. Anish, is it still relevant to discuss this part? Not sure he's still here. Anish? Okay, there was a question.
Stella.
Yes, hey, sorry. Maybe you can put it up here so we can discuss.
Yeah, actually, I saw a point saying that more shipments are recommended by Mickey. So I was just wondering, like, if there are more shipments, then definitely there'll be more operations and more costs associated with it, right? So how is this actually being done? Like when there are multiple shipments being done, how do we manage a cost aspect of it?
Well, this is always a question that comes up under the assumption that increasing the frequency of shipments also increases the number of shipments or the quantities being handled. But please understand that when you work with batching, you have additional cost by moving inventory you are not supposed to be moving at all. Okay, so normally by increasing the replenishment frequency, not only cost doesn't go up, it actually goes down. We have less quantities being moved around.
You also have a greater mix. If it's a container load, you'd have a greater mix in there than you would otherwise.
There are many solutions for that, but specifically, the thing is that we are tending to forget that right now, because of the long forecasting horizon and the minimum order quantities practices and the full truck practices, there is a lot of cost associated with moving things that are not supposed to be moving, warehousing things that are not supposed to be warehousing, handling things that we are not supposed to be handling.
Yeah, things you don't need yet.
Exactly. Not to mention cost of obsolescence.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Well, at the beginning of the webinar, there was this hot discussion about Zara and the medical. I guess we can organize a separate study on Zara webinar, so we can go into digging into details. But Jorge mentioned here in a comment in the beginning that perhaps there was a question about OTIF, okay, and the quality related to did quality suffer achieving such a high OTIF, and Jorge saying that it might be also the fact that it's probably related to MTO or MTS, manufacturing policy around. Is it something can it be something related to that when it comes to OTIF and quality, or not necessarily? Jorge, and if I'm not verbalizing the question correctly, please jump in.
Yes, that's what's been going on in my mind in these past moments. It's Mickey was tight to say that there's only one KPI. OTIF, in the general knowledge, it's one of the basic KPIs in supply chain. In my eyes, it mixes 4 different things that all of them are important.
Yes.
And by multiplying them, it gives a rare sense of inaccuracy, at least in my eyes, right? So what I understood is everything improves, or every standard KPI that we are using today will improve if we change the behavior. Of course, it's the only thing that would change the KPIs. But could you elaborate a little on which is the KPI? I was not sure to grab what.
Okay, so to elaborate and to make it clear, one KPI, but there can be other performance measures, okay? The KPI is the KPI that is the most important in terms of our competitiveness. So in supply chain, we would look at on time in full. On time in full is measured very simply. Were we able to supply our customers with all the items they ordered in the right quantity, in the right quality, at the committed time? And it's a 0-1 game. If one item is missing out of 1,000, we did not deliver on time in full. Okay? And this is the only measure, which is a performance measure of a supply chain, as a KPI. There are other measures. We can definitely measure within the operations other things. The most important of them would be the replenishment lead time. Okay? Because the shorter the replenishment lead time, the better we will be. And this is the only measure, by the way, that when you improve on it, you automatically improve on all others. Okay, as replenishment lead time shrinks, everything else improves. If you try to improve any other measure by itself, the effect of the improvement on other measurements is unknown. It can be positive, but it can be negative. Replenishment lead time, if it improves, all others will improve as well. So there is a KPI, there are performance measurements. The reason why, as I explained, why we separate KPI from other measurements is to give people within the system a clarity of priority. If I'm telling you that you are responsible for on time in full, and also for operational cost, and also for quality, and also for response time, these are your 4 measurements, and you come to a situation where in order to deliver on time in full, cost needs to go up, then you jeopardize cost. You don't jeopardize on time in full.
Mickey, it's interesting that you say lead time, because I would go the other way and say inventory should come down And if I want to take inventory down, I must in any case reduce the lead time. But so in fact, we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, I'm looking at it from a cause and effect standpoint. Inventory is a result of lead time, not vice versa.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Stella?
Not in the chat. Maybe
Anyone has a question, or we can go to the last slide?
questions on the homework, whatever. If
Yeah, I will just pitch in Mickey one.
Please, Faisal.
Yeah, is it a good idea to have our suppliers have a blanket yearly order, and then they keep the consignments ready, like something like a blanket order and a consignment stock,
Well,
and we ask them to send it once and whenever we need it?
well, the answer is for some of the suppliers, definitely. Not necessarily all of them, okay? For some of them, obviously, we would like them to be in a relationship where they hold inventory for us, we consume from their inventory, they replenish to their inventory, and we have a commitment which is periodical, and the commitment can also have bonus payment for performance. Okay. We definitely, when I said change relationship, this is part of the change in relationship. Now, consignment or not consignment, real thing is it only changes for the first order. After the first order, you're paying anyhow for what you are consuming, so it doesn't change anything. The consignment is just affecting the first inventory buildup.
Okay, thank you.
Consignment can be an incentive to help the customer make the decision to move to this sort of thing. And it is something that financially can make a lot of good sense depending on the payment practices and things like that.
Yeah.
Shlish has another good question there. What about the smaller businesses where supply options are limited? And that goes in both directions, so to get supply from their suppliers, but also in the other direction to their customers.
Good. That's a good question. I will answer in the following way. First is a fundamental belief I carry with me is that the relationship that one node of the supply chain can generate with another is nothing to do with size, is everything to do with the value that one node can provide to the other. And if we can understand that even when we buy, definitely when we sell, we are actually selling. And if we can go to our suppliers and show them enough value in having a relationship with us, or to our customers and show them enough value of buying from us, then size will become irrelevant. I'll give you one example. I worked with an ice cream producer in Israel. This ice cream producer had one store. Okay, one store, factory was in the behind the store. This is opening. So not a big producer. And at that time in Israel, there was one supplier of milk. Okay, so it wasn't a monopoly, one milk supplier. And there were relationship of supply customer, which were in line with the size gap. Okay, but once we came up with a value proposal to the milk supplier, we were able to change the relationship totally, even though no one believed it was possible. Okay? No one in the ice cream factory believed they would be able to change the relationship with this one huge supplier. So I
think we get this Shlish.
I can't hear you, please.
Yeah, this is Shlish. I was the one who posed that question to you a little while ago.
No. There's something wrong with your connection. I can't hear you.
Mine as well.
Maybe you want to write down your questions because we can't hear you well.
I've just put up the question chat?
Yes,
Sorry,
please.
who is talking? I'm also having
Shrish.
a Shrish. Okay,
Shrish,
so
yeah.
I'll read it.
Good. Yep.
Okay, okay, I'll try because my chat is also kind of okay. The entire process of replenishment will be heavily dependent on not just the flexibility of the supply node, on the supply node's options. Just a second, give me a second. It's a big comment, so I'll just copy it like this, and I'll make it. Give me a second.
Am I audible now?
No.
Now your connection, okay, I have it here. So the entire process of replenishment will heavily depend on not just the flexibility of the supply node, but also on availability of equally competent supply node options. This is first part. Second, these processes are good to work on large businesses where there are more options available to address the above constraints. What about the smaller businesses where the supply options are limited?
Well, wasn't that just what I answered now?
This is the only one. The only question you had, Shish, because I don't find it. Yeah, another one.
He made another comment, which is with ice cream, we are still referring to a big consumer base.
Here, yes.
The big consumer base?
Yeah.
Yeah, you and me and everybody else in Israel, except that I'm not in Israel, are many consumers, so that the aggregation works very easily there. But your story, I think, is much more between the ice cream manufacturer, the shop, and the producer of milk.
Yes, yes. It was not with the market. It was with the supplier of the milk.
Yeah.
Okay. It was to talk about a very small business, one ice cream store. This was the whole business, working with the monopoly of milk supply of Israel. There was one company supplying milk at that time to the whole country. Okay.
And the story is a very nice one, Mickey. I think you should publish a nice little story on LinkedIn for everybody to read.
Well, we can do that definitely. Okay. If there are no more questions, then I will say the following, guys.
I have a comment though, Mickey. I have a quick comment. All of this is very nice, and I am doing something very similar to you in the area of fashion textile, and it is not an easy sell. The kind of questions that we got today also happened to me. I was doing it this morning, and it is something that needs to be sold very well to these people so they understand what is going to actually happen to them. Their paradigm is turned on their head for most of these people.
Yes, this is true in a sense, but I want to take it to a bit of a simpler approach here, okay? We have today in our hands new technological capabilities. You guys have under your fingers technology which is by far more powerful and capable than what you are able to do with it.
Yeah, the technology we have, that's not the problem.
So what we need to do is we need to change ourselves so we can take advantage of the technology that we have. Okay, we can change ourselves so that we can take our supply chains and make them faster and significantly more cost effective. And the changes, Rudy is saying it's changing the paradigms. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Because at the end, what are we doing? We are in supply chain management, we are staying with something which is relatively very simple. We have to order what we need at the time we need it and to be able to respond to it quickly enough. And what are we changing? Instead of reordering every X time, reorder every day. It has no cost today. It has no meaning. It has no negative effect on anything. We are changing from focusing on groups of items or local efficiencies to looking at the overall performance of the system. It makes sense. It's not a dramatic change. The system has an objective, it has a goal. The only way we can survive is we are becoming more competitive than the others. Right, when you go to the details, there are many challenges, but there are many challenges in the details even today.
Mm.
So we can look at it as something which is very dramatic, but it is not. Not only it is not very dramatic, it creates a very significant impact very, very fast. And when I say these guys, this is not wishful thinking. This is experience.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Not from something which is a drama, not something that calls you to, it's this, what do we say? Know what your supply chain is. Know how you measure your supply chain performance. Know your replenishment lead times between the nodes of your supply chain. Put the inventory in the right place in the supply chain. Order every day. Replenish in a higher frequency. Take care of priorities according to the risk to the performance of the supply chain. And ever improve, use the lean tools in an effective way. It is not a drama. It is not taking you totally away of what you would do. It's just telling you how to do it in a different way, in a more effective way, in a way that will give you much better results, much faster, consistently, and will enable you to become better and better. This is not a
I think the young guy there will agree.
No, I'm sure he's being grown into that.
Okay.
Okay, guys. So as there are no other questions, let me just say one thing. There is a lot of knowledge behind what we discussed over here. Maybe Rudy is in sense in his comment relating to the fact that there is so much depth of know-how behind all of this.
Exactly.
And definitely in 1 hour and 30 minutes of our webinar, we can't go into this depth. So those of you who would like to know more and are interested in deepening their knowledge, we are offering a substantial supply chain expert training program online via Zoom starting in September. 100 hours of education program will be led by myself, Eli Schragenheim, and Stella, and will give you a very fundamental and profound understanding of each and every part of the discussed today, and the skills and the know-how to be able to execute it. So Stella and I will send you some information about it after that, if you are interested.
It'll be examined as well, no?
Excuse me?
It will be examined as well and
yes, and it will be
certified.
A certification program, so participants will also get a certification both from us as well as from TOCICO. So those of you who are interested are invited to join us. And of course, if anyone specifically is interested in any additional information, please feel free to contact us and let us know how we can be of an assistance.
Yeah, we have you on LinkedIn and emails as well, so feel free to contact directly.
And if this is, if there are no more questions, then we will thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate very much you taking the time. We hope we were able to provide you some value today. And we look forward to seeing you in previous activities we will have together.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Miriam,
Have a nice day.
For me, can we continue for a couple of minutes?
Sure, if I can have a smoke together with you. I'm dying.
You can smoke as much as you want, as long as you're not doing it here.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Have a good week.
Thank you.
Have a good week.